What is the funniest thing you have seen in public? Back when I was a student, I drove an old, ugly, beat-up Peugeot 205. As I was driving to uni one morning, I stopped at a red light. Next to me stops a big, expensive Mercedes. I manually roll down my window for a smoke, and the Merc driver happens to lower his at the same time. Driver was some kind of manager in a suit. He looks at me, comes over to the passenger side, and shouts, politely, "Did you also just fart, SR? Holy shit, I lost it right there. It's been over 20 years, and I still remember this man."
That's a funny story. It's always the unexpected moments that stick with you. The contrast between your old car and the fancy Mercedes makes it even better. That guy really knew how to lighten the mood at a red light. I can picture the look on your face too. It's wild how small interactions can leave such a lasting impression. Definitely a moment you'll never forget.
About 6 years ago, I was the passenger in the car with my grandfather, and we were sitting at a red light on a hill going down. We had our windows open because it was a really nice day. Suddenly we heard, "Yeah," coming from behind us. We both turned in our seats and saw a very old-looking man in a wheelchair flying down the hill on the sidewalk with his arms up in the air, occasionally reaching down to push his wheels for more momentum. Then a woman who appeared to be in her 50s came into view, and she was yelling, "Stop this right now, George. This is not funny," while attempting to chase him. The light turned green, so we just continued to go. I do not know what happened to George after that.
That sounds like quite the scene. I can picture it clearly. You and your grandpa in the car, just trying to enjoy a nice day, and then this wild moment unfolds. That old guy really went for it, huh? I wonder how he felt, zooming down like that. And the woman chasing him, probably a mix of worry and frustration. Definitely a story to remember, even if you never found out how it ended.
Some mentally unsound dude having a 10-minute conversation with the image of a woman on an advertisement poster along a street. Was sitting at a cafe a short distance away and just chuckle my ass off. It looked like an actual, real conversation with hand gestures, head nods, body mannerisms, etc. Couldn't quite make out what he was saying, but after a while he waved to her and walked off.
That's an interesting sight. I guess we all have our moments, right? It's wild how people express themselves, even if it's just to a poster. I wonder what he was saying. Just shows that everyone has their own way of connecting with things around them. Makes you think about the little quirks in life. I'd probably have a laugh too if I saw that up close.
I'm heading home from my first trip to Vegas. Buddy and I are running on fumes when a well-dressed man flies by us while talking loudly on his cell phone. He cuts in front of us and into the revolving doors, tries to exit too soon, and slams into the window panel, thinking it wasn't there. Similar to a kid in a mirror maze. Splashes his coffee everywhere. To this day, it still makes me laugh.
That sounds like a classic Vegas moment. It's funny how people can be so caught up in their own world that they overlook simple things. That guy really had a rough time with those doors. It's nice to have a memory like that to laugh about later, especially when you're both tired after an adventure. Sometimes those little mishaps can really stick with you.
I was walking down the road one wintry morning when I heard an exclamation from the mechanic up the hill on my left. I watched a man struggle to try and get in a VW Beetle that was sliding down the sloped parking lot. He was able to get the door open, but not quick enough to get inside. The car eventually came to rest with the front tires idling, spinning in the air. There was a 3-foot retaining wall between the road and parking lot. I got to watch a car accident in slow motion. Very slow motion. LOL.
That sounds like an interesting start to your day. It's funny how some moments feel like they're playing out in slow motion. The guy probably felt a mix of panic and disbelief as he watched the car slide away. It's one of those ordinary yet unexpected scenes that stick with you. I guess winter mornings can bring out some unexpected surprises. Always a bit of entertainment on the road, I guess.
This may expose me, but I saw a friend use a beer funnel on faux broth at a restaurant. The funny part was before he did it, another friend put the danger sauce, the one spicier than sriracha, in the broth beforehand without him realizing. When he did it, a third friend reactively gagged and went to the bathroom to puke. I could not stop laughing, and yes, we were pretty much told to pay and leave ASAP.
That sounds like quite the scene. It's interesting how some friends push the limits of what's acceptable in public. I guess the mix of broth and that spicy sauce was just too much for one of them. Sometimes you just can't help but laugh even if it gets you in trouble. Paying the bill and leaving must have been a fun ending to an unexpected night.
It was red at traffic signal. There was a guy in a car right beside me. He was scrolling through Insta, and there was a girl in a reel lip syncing to a song with those cringe facial expressions and body language. He liked that reel and started mimicking like her. He thought he had his window rolled up, but they weren't.
I got stuck at a red light the other day. There was this guy next to me, just scrolling on his phone. He saw a girl in a reel, doing those over-the-top lip syncs. Next thing I know, he's trying to imitate her, all into it, thinking his window was up. Turns out it wasn't, and I couldn't help but laugh at how clueless he was. Just a regular day, really.
I was on a flight and sitting behind the exit row. The flight attendants make you say a verbal yes to indicate you take responsibility for sitting in the exit row. Everyone gives their yes, but this older lady, who wasn't really paying attention, sort of nods politely at the flight attendant. The flight attendant keeps staring at her, waiting on yes, and everyone else in exit row starts to stare at her too. Lady is confused and kind of gives a MMHM and a nod. Not good enough. She's even more confused on what is happening, and more people are staring and murmuring that you have to do a verbal yes. Her husband finally gives her an elbow jab, and something clicks, and she finally screams yes, at the top of her lungs in this terrified voice. Ha! And then everyone laughs at her. I still think she didn't really get why everyone all of a sudden wanted her to just say the word yes all of a sudden. It's probably a you had to be there thing, but it still cracks me up.
That sounds like a classic flight moment. You've got this older lady just trying to figure out what's going on, and then suddenly she's the center of attention. It must have been awkward at first, but everyone cracking up probably eased the tension. It's funny how something so simple, the need to say yes, turned into a mini drama on a plane. Definitely one of those moments people won't forget easily.
I was a kid in the summer camp, and someone put sugar into the salt shakers. Another kid decided to salt his mashed potatoes, but the lid of the shaker broke off, and he ended up with a plate full of sugar. Disappointed, he decided to put some more sugar in his tea from what was left in the shaker, but what was left at the bottom was salt.
That's a classic summer camp moment. It's funny how something like a mislabeled shaker can lead to a mess. I remember a similar incident with a friend, mixing up flour and powdered sugar. We ended up with a terrible cake that nobody wanted to eat. Sometimes those little mistakes turn into memories worth laughing about later. Just goes to show that camp meals can get wild.
Was sitting outside of a courtroom, and up walks this old lady that sits across from me and my girlfriend. She proceeded to pull out a bulk big jar of dill pickle chips, then sits on the phone talking loudly while force-feeding 4 or 5 slices at a time. I text my girlfriend, just sitting in the courthouse eating some pickles. No big deal. Girlfriend proceeded to cry laughing.
That sounds like a pretty wild scene. You don't expect to see someone casually munching on pickles in a courthouse. I like how you made a joke out of it too. It's always those little moments that stick with you, you know? I can picture your girlfriend laughing hard. It's nice to have those simple, funny times to break up the seriousness of a place like that.
One time, I saw a guy carrying an oversized stuffed dinosaur, 3 foot tall, brightly colored. He confidently strutted past a high-end boutique, thinking he was the toughest dino walker in town. The store attendant barely flinched. Turns out, the true roar came moments later when he stepped in a puddle and nearly took it all over. Only the squeak of that squishy dino could salvage his pride as he laughed it off, facing a cheering crowd. Sometimes, humor is the best T-Rex remedy.
That sounds like a fun scene. It's interesting how people can be so confident in odd situations. The dinosaur adds a nice touch. I can imagine the crowd laughing, making it a moment he probably remembers well, even with the puddle fiasco. Sometimes you just have to roll with it and enjoy the laughs, even if it's a bit embarrassing. That's life, I guess.
Local man hung his coat in a tree outside our office, then had a very animated conversation with it, including wild arm gestures. The convo devolved into yelling and threats against the coat. He ignored any humans nearby. When the cops showed up, he grabbed the coat and said, "Let me do all the talking." A deputy told us he was familiar to them, and they returned him to his group home.
Sometimes you see things that really make you question what's normal. A guy having a full-on argument with his coat outside the office is one of those moments. He was so into it, completely ignoring everyone else. Then the cops come, and he just flips the script, thinking the coat was going to bail him out. Turns out, he's a regular at the local group home. Just one of those days, I guess.
I had a Lamborghini pull up alongside me in a double left-turn lane. I assume it was a rental because when the light turned green, they floored it, proceeded to overcorrect on the turn, lost control, and almost rammed it into a barrier. I waited for the shit show to finish, then drove by and tooted my horn. My CRV was so impressed.
That's a pretty memorable moment. It's wild how some people just can't handle a bit of power. Seeing that happen must have been a mix of disbelief and amusement. Your CRV probably felt like it was on a different level. It's funny how a flashy car doesn't always mean the driver knows what they're doing. Glad it ended without any major incidents. Just shows you can't judge a car by its looks.
I was walking my dog a little after midnight when a cab pulled up across the street from me. Out of 3 of the 4 doors jumped 3 college guys, followed by the largest drag queen I've ever seen. She must have been 6 foot 5, 7 foot in heels, and took off in a full sprint after them. She was able to wrangle 2 out of the 3 and drag them back to the cab to pay. They went on their way, and she turned to me and said, "Aw, cute dog. You got him, girl."
That sounds like quite the scene. Just a regular night walk turning into a wild chase. It's funny how unexpected moments can create a bit of chaos. The drag queen must have been pretty determined. And it's nice that she took a second to acknowledge your dog. Just a reminder of the quirky things that happen when you least expect them.
I was in NYC outside MSG, camping out to see Rage Against the Machine in the pit on their last tour. Saw a homeless man at 4 a.m. eating loose soup crackers with some birds following him. He dropped one and got really mad and started saying things under his breath. One of the birds took a bite but didn't finish it, and all the birds left and stopped following. The cracker sat for another 3 hours before it got swept up.
That night outside MSG sounds pretty wild. It's funny how a little moment like that can stick in your head. The guy getting mad over a dropped cracker, while birds just act like birds. Makes you think about how people deal with their own little battles. Watching the whole scene unfold while waiting for a concert shows how life can be a mix of the mundane and the memorable.
Was walking into a Chick-fil-A from a side door next to the playground. Entrance shared a window into the playground, and we walked in right as this little kid in there tripped and face planted in the most comic way possible. Like cartoony. He wasn't physically hurt, but his pride sure was. Poor kid saw us laughing and started crying. We couldn't help it, the timing was just too good, and it surprised us.
Yeah, I get that. It's funny how kids can go from laughing to crying in seconds. The way they can just wipe out sometimes is wild. You know it's not meant to be mean, but sometimes you just can't stop yourself. I remember witnessing a similar thing. It's just pure timing. You feel bad for them, but it's hard not to chuckle at how unexpected it was. Kids bounce back anyway.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.